The neon arteries of Cryos 9 pulsed like a living thing, feeding light into the sleepless megacity until even the shadows felt electrified. Transit spines throbbed with bullet trams. Airlines were stacked 9 high with courier skiffs and luxury rigs. Holo banners unfurled between towers like aurora caught in glass. And at the heart of it all, embedded like a meteor lodged in bone, loomed the echelon domosphere of diamond lattice and force field filaments big enough to swallow a stadium and still have room for a weather system. Above it, the sky was a billboard in 1,000 alphabets. Arena Trials Final Round Survive or Die. The slogan was older than Kellenve, older than Cryos 9, some said. She watched it flicker across a polished steel bulkhead as the lift dropped toward Subgate 6, hands tucked under her arms to hide the tremor. The lift's windows offered flashing vignettes, a luxury lounge, where sponsors clinked jeweled glasses, a barracks full of recruits with buzzed scalps and matching smiles, a chapel where someone had erected a shrine to probability, candles guttering in artificial wind. Kellen had squeezed into the final round at 99th place by less than a point, statistically indistinguishable from luck, her bunkmate had said the night before, voice soothing with the clinical kindness of someone already grieving for you. Kellen hadn't argued. She didn't much like statistics when they were pointed at her. The lift side open. Subgate 6 was a tunnel lined with scanners, med stations, and security pylons the size of trees. Contestants filed past in fistfuls, gleaming with augmentations, dermal plating spun like nacre, chromatic irises that tracked drone telemetry, subdermal capacitors flexing beneath tattooed skin. Cullen carried a canvas duffel threadbare at the seams. Inside, a patched iron blade, a compact pulse carbine with a tendency to jam, 2 charged cells of unknown provenance, and 1 cracked inertial shield module she'd bought from a scaver who swore it had only killed 1 owner. The medbot chirred when it scanned her. Prior injuries. It asked, voice crisp, genderless. A typical scarring pattern suggests accelerated tissue knitting. Illicit Regan? No, Kellen said. Workbench. Industrial splicer. My hand slipped. Your hand slipped repeatedly. Yes, the medbot stared. Someone behind her chuckled. Proceed, the bot said at last. Dispenser whirring out a blister pack of neural painkillers. You are underrested. Cortisol levels are. Kellen palmed the pills and kept moving. Underrested was one way to frame it. She hadn't slept through a full night since she'd landed on Cryos 9 with a locker of borrowed kit. And the conviction that the arena trials solved things. For winners, debt evaporated. For losers, the consequences were clean, final. Instead, the trials had made everything more complicated, sponsors circling like carrion birds. Rules nested inside loopholes like Matryoshka dolls. Feeds that spun rumors into currency. Her ranking badge buzzed as she approached the staging concourse. She tapped it. A holo flared from her wrist, listing the names of the top 10. She only recognized a few: Alec Volsarn, Admiral's son, whose combat clips were edited like music videos. Shu Oren with the nanofilament whip. Mela Drax, a mind-born heavy who had thrown someone off a moving tram just to see how their smart armor absorbed shock. Kellen flicked past them to the bottom of the list. Number 100 was a private name, concealed at sponsor request. Number 99, Kellen Vey Independent, the nicest word for unsponsored. Voices rippled across the concourse: trash talk, prayer, negotiation. Kellen dropped to one knee at a bench against the wall and stripped her carbine in practice motions, letting the familiar tasks dam the current of her thoughts. Eject magazine. Check alignment of the feed lips. Inspect the extractor for chipping. Wipe the carbon from the bolt face with the corner of her sleeve. The action stuttered when she cycled it, a gritty catch at the closed end of the rail. She scraped it with the edge of a ration token until the burr flaked away. Antique. Someone said above her. Sentimental value? She glanced up. The speaker was a woman with mirrored jaw plates and a scalp tattoo of a compass rose. Her team's colors, white and phosphor green, were stitched into her suit. Functional value, Kellen said, and reseated the bolt. The woman tilted her head, caught her reflection fracturing in her own jaw. You the 99th? Apparently. Don't die stupid, the woman said, not unkindly, and moved on. A horn sounded. On the far side of the concourse, a set of steel doors ratcheted upward, revealing a narrow passage, the descent. Past it lay the echelon gauntlet proper. Kellen's heart flipped like a thrown coin. She finished reassembly, slid the carbine home on its mag lock, and slung her duffel over one shoulder. The crowd flowed toward the descent. She let herself be carried along. A shadow fell across her. She looked up into a smile so bright it felt manufactured. Alec Volsarn looked exactly as he did on the feeds, tall, sculpted, hair cut to imply military discipline without obscuring the photogenic lines. His armor was the blue-black of a night sea and laced with capacitive veins. His rifle slung smart on a shoulder mount that adjusted for recoil and aim. "Vey, is it?" he said, as if confirming a catering order. "Yes," Kellen said. "I watch all the heat maps," he said, tapping a temple where an optic implant glowed like a star tucked under skin. "You have interesting movement. Avoidant, efficient, though." "Thanks," she said. "You too." He laughed like they were friends. "I mean it. You're a ghost on the periphery and then, surprise, you extract. That sort of play can get you to the final round. You're here, after all." Kellen waited. "I like to assemble ad hoc units for the early phases," he said. "We clear out the noise, split the salvage. I take the primary targets. My allies do very well. You should consider it. Translation, be my shield, and if you live you'll get my scraps." The offer wasn't bad by trial standards. It was almost generous. Kellen's chest tightened with a memory. A belt line on a refinery moon, light buckling in the heat. Her father teaching her to listen to machinery, to how metal spoke when it was about to fail. "Trust what you can verify," he'd said. "Systems lie when people program them to. Metal tells the truth when it buckles." "I'll consider it," Kellen said. His smile thinned. The first true expression she'd seen. "Do, or don't, survive either way, if you can. May the probability shade you." He merged back into his cohort, the air around him humming with microdrone lift. Kellen exhaled and found herself at the mouth of the descent. The passage tasted like ozone and salt. Floor plates vibrated, not from machinery, but from the roar of 10,000 spectators transmitted through structure. The air cooled as she walked. Lights dimmed to a twilight bruise. At the end of the passage, a transpolymer curtain quivered with projected rain. Kellen pushed through and the world opened. The gauntlet wasn't an arena so much as a controlled planet. Terrain painters had gone mad with budget and sadism. A river of acid ran like melted emerald through a canyon of slag stone. To the left, a jungle rose in tiers, leaves fat as shields, draped with bioluminescent moss. To the right, the hulks of starships rusted in deliberate arrangement, a sculpture garden of war. Overhead, a dome of lattice flashed with weather algorithms. Storm cells spun into existence and evaporated. Like ideas, the announcer's voice came from everywhere and nowhere, threaded into the tinnitus of the crowd. "Challengers, welcome to the Echelon Gauntlet. You know the terms. There's no fixed map, no fixed time limit, no fixed mercy. Drones will track your progress. Kill cams will share your glory. Only one may claim the title of Apex Champion." But this year, a teasing pause, expertly timed. The crowd rose to it. "This year, we've introduced evolutionary pressure." Screens set into the lattice flared to bright, forcing Kellen's eyes to close. When she blinked them open again, a holo blossomed above the jungle, a silhouette tall as a dropship, plated in darkness. Eyes like coals, the feeds erupted. Weapons hummed as they charged. Kellen's skin prickled. The apex. Some said it had been printed from a genetic library older than Earth. Others said it was new every year, built from the worst instincts of the last. The official line was that it was an obstacle, not a competitor. The unofficial line was that it was a message. You are not the top of anything. You'll know it when you hear it, the announcer purred. You'll feel it when it watches you. A clangor rolled through the gauntlet as gates along the perimeter unlocked. Kellen's display ticked down from 0:30. The field of contestants spread along the line like a fuse about to burn. Beside her, someone crossed themselves, not to any god Kellen recognized, but to ritual itself. She checked her blade, her carbine, her shield module, her breath. "What do you know?" she asked herself, the way she would before crawling into a refiner to midwife a failing pump back to life. She knew her legs would hold. She'd run on less. She knew her hands would obey, even if they trembled when idle. She knew no one was coming to save her. Not because she was unworthy, but because that wasn't how this world worked. She knew machines better than she knew people. And the gauntlet was a machine pretending to be a wilderness. If she listened, it would tell her where it would break. The clock hit 10. She rolled her shoulders and let the concourse noise drain to a hum. 9. She thought of the message that had arrived that morning. Unsigned, delivered through a secure feed she hadn't known she had. Noise is the first predator. Silence is the second. Do not feed either. 8. She'd laughed then, assuming a sponsor's mind game. Now the words sat differently in her gut. 7. She had an apartment the size of a shipping crate and a debt schedule that climbed like ivy. She had a father somewhere between stars, traveling with a salvage crew that never made landfall, leaving messages that arrived in batches like meteor showers. She had a rank that meant she was almost a ghost. 6, 5, 4. Alex's cohort spread like a fan, their drones painting invisible arcs of sight lines. Shu's team stacked tight and low, a coiled animal. The Mindborns rolled their shoulders. Kellen took 2 steps back from the line. 3. She closed her eyes. Not prayer. A calibration of breath to heartbeat. The lattice above flickered with weather. In the jungle, something huge and quiet moved. 1. The gates crashed upward. The gauntlet inhaled 100 bodies. Kellen did not sprint. That was how you fed the first predator, noise. She moved with a runner's economy, longer strides than her height seemed to allow, skirting the acid river where nanospray drifted like pollen. A trio broke left toward high ground. A duo plunged straight into the ship grave, vaulting struts and wheelhouses. The scream of first contact rose behind her, sharp and brief, then clipped as an automed sealed someone's throat. She slipped into the jungle's edge. The humidity hit like a hand. Leaves brushed her armor. The ground gave slightly, spongy with engineered biomass. A hazard the feeds would later call a soft sink. She kept to roots and buried hull plates. Her display pinged, a drone somewhere ahead, scanning for heart rates, electromagnetic leakage, pattern of thermal disturb. She slid under a fallen spar where cold air bled from a cracked coolant line. The scanner passed with a hollow insect buzz. Something clicked to her right. She froze, finger easing to the trigger. A small shape skittered. A herbivore drone, metal mimicking muscle, mouth full of sensor filaments. It tasted the air and moved on, legs articulating with the fussy precision of an engineer who loved spiders. Kellen let herself breathe. A calm line chimed, a public channel, a shared hail. Alex's voice, smooth as ever. Sector Theta is clear, he announced to anyone listening, which was everyone. If you're smart, you move now. If you're not, don't worry, the gauntlet will move you. Bait. He wanted a stream flowing toward him. Easy to cull. Kellen slipped deeper, past a stand of trees exuding vapor that beaded on her visor like sweat. Up ahead, the jungle opened into a clearing littered with cargo pods. Someone had dragged them here to make a haphazard wall. She crouched, studied the angles. The pods were printed into runs. The first had a manufacturer's code Kellen recognized from the refinery moon. The second didn't. The second also bore scratches along their seams. A pattern too irregular to be random. She approached one, traced the scratches with a gloved finger. Microclaw marks, not human-sized, not drone. Her muscles tightened not from fear, but from recognition. The pattern repeated on the ground, three-toed impressions, deep, heel absent, weight distributed toward the front. Fresh, she looked up. The noise arrived first, because the second predator was watching someone else. A roar so low, it was almost below hearing. A pressure that rode the bones. Leaves rattled as if applauding. Kellen flattened behind a pod as a shadow collapsed the clearing into a smaller place. It stepped into view 12 feet at the shoulder, plated in obsidian scales that ate light, ridges like ship keels running the length of its back. Its eyes burned a color Kellen had no name for, neither fire nor ice. Something that remembered both. Its breath fogged in the humid air, then vanished, as if the jungle swallowed even that. The apex. Every part of Kellen screamed at her to run. Even the quiet parts, the ones she had trained to ignore panic, said, move. Her legs didn't obey, not because they refused, but because she refused to feed the first predator. She slowed herself down to the careful stillness of a worker inside a machine. That could close on her like a fist. The apex lowered its head. The ridges crackled, not with electricity, but with a sound like it wanted to be electricity when it grew up. It put one clawed paw instrument on the top of a cargo pod and pressed. The metal squealed, shrieked, then depressed as if it had always meant to be less. Kellen eased her carbine up. She did not point it at the apex. She pointed it at the jungle floor a meter in front of it. Her thumb found the selector. Single round. She adjusted her stance to absorb the recoil without the whine her niece sometimes made. A buzz at her ear. Private channel. Unlisted source. Noise is the first predator. The voice from that morning said again. Closer now, intimate. Silence is the second. Do not feed either. Listen. To what? The roar had subsided into a throat sound like a planet turning. Over it, she heard felt a different cadence. Small, high, uneven. Her father's voice surfaced in memory. Not all mechanical noises are machines. Not all silences mean nothing's wrong. Kellen took a breath so small it barely counted and slid the carbine down. She peered under the belly of the apex, past the cargo wall. Something shivered in the tangle of printed roots behind it. Three somethings. She saw the glint first, not of metal but of scale miniature plates, like the big ones. Flexing with each small, panicked breath. Cubs. The thought arrived without sound, as if the gauntlet itself had whispered it. The apex's head lifted away from the pods. Those impossible eyes raking the trees where a contestant snapped a twig they hadn't seen. The massive creature roared, a sound designed not only to take the courage out of bones, but to give it to anyone foolish enough to protect what they loved. Kellen's mouth was dry. Her tongue tasted of copper. The comms exploded with terrified profanity. Weapons spun up. The clearing became geometry, angles of fire, arcs of retreat. Kellen could map it in her head without looking. 3 shooters at 10 o'clock, 1 at 2, 1 creeping in behind the cargo at 7. The apex oriented toward the noisiest threat, which was human. The cubs shivered in the blind spot that humans hadn't noticed because they were looking at teeth. Kellen slid out from behind the pod, slow as viscosity. She kept her palms open, not because the apex would understand the gesture, but because she needed something left to do. That wasn't pull a trigger. The jungle air smelled of wet iron and the synth citrus of coolant. The apex did not move. Its eyes tracked the shooters. Its flank covered the cubs. It was a wall that was also a knife. Don't, Kellen said softly. Not sure to whom. She stepped into the clearing. Alec Volsarn dropped from a branch line above like a verdict, boots hissing with microthrusters. His rifle indexed, sights glinting. His smile had fallen off somewhere in the trees. There it is, he said, voice carrying on the open channel like theater. Primary target. Vey, darling, step aside. She looked at the cubs again. One of them had a crack along its smallest ridge, the sort of injury that could tilt a body's future if not set. Kellen's fingers curled reflexively. She had set so many things that wanted to break wrong. Alec's rifle hummed. Around the clearing, other weapons answered. The apex coiled. Kellen did something that did not fit into any coach's playbook, any sponsor's fantasy, any feed's expectations. She walked forward, past the busted cargo pods, past the small trembling lives, and toward the thing that could open her like an envelope and scatter whatever message she carried. Across the jungle floor. The apex's head swung toward her. Its pupils, did they have pupils? Narrowed, expanded, doing math she didn't know. Kellen kept walking. She set her carbine down on the ground, slow enough that the weapon didn't clack against the plate and make a noise. That would feed the first predator. She lifted both hands, palms up, empty. Easy, she said. Her voice surprised her by not shaking. I'm not here to hurt you. Somewhere behind her, someone laughed once, high and incredulous. Alec said something she didn't catch, and maybe no one did, because the apex exhaled a sound like a storm deciding not to happen. And in the crack of that mercy she heard it again, the thin, urgent whimper of a young thing with a ridge cracked at the seam. Kellen took one more step. The gauntlet held its breath. The crowd, the drones, the weather algorithms, everything paused between roar and silence, waiting to see which predator she would feed. She reached the edge of the nest. A cub the size of a housecat, but shaped like a knife, looked up at her. With eyes too large for its face, it hissed, then hiccuped. Its tiny ridges quivered. "Hey," Kellen whispered, and lowered her hand. "Let me see." The apex's roar faded into the distance, leaving a vacuum of silence in its wake. The kind that made your ears ring, because your brain refused to believe the sound was gone. Kellen crouched low behind the melted shell of a cargo pod, pulse hammering against the inside of her throat. Her chest still felt scorched from the sheer force of that scream, as if the air itself had claws and had raked through her lungs. Somewhere deep in the jungle, it was moving again, and it wasn't moving away. The echelon gauntlet was chaos now. The moment the apex revealed itself, the structure of the competition dissolved like sugar in rain. Alliances shattered. Combatants who had once been enemies were screaming over shared comms, forming panic packs. The predators had realized they were prey. Kellen slipped her fingers under the rim of her battered iron blade and scanned the jungle floor for movement. The cubs, 3 of them, trembling, chirping soft ultrasonic cries, were still huddled beneath the wreckage. Their scales had a sheen to them now that she noticed, like liquid glass over obsidian. "Fragile, perfect, you shouldn't even exist here," she murmured under her breath. The trials were supposed to be about strength, cunning, evolution, but not this. They had always unleashed an apex, one creature, designed to kill anything that moved, but never had there been signs of offspring. That meant the organism wasn't just a weapon, it was a species, and that changed everything. "Vey," the voice came through her calm, clipped, military perfect. "Alec Volsarn, Vey, you're on my scanner. What's your position?" Kellen stayed silent. "Don't play the ghost. I saw you near the apex nest. Tell me I'm wrong." She almost laughed. "Nest, so he'd noticed too. What do you want, Alec?" She replied, finally. Her voice was a whisper. "What do I want?" He sounded incredulous. "I want that thing's head mounted in the victory chamber. I want the credit, and I want those cubs neutralized before the board decides they're worth more alive than dead." There it was, the real reason he was calling. The cubs weren't just biological anomalies. They were assets. To a syndicate, they were priceless. To the Imperium, dangerous. And to Alec Volsarn, they were leverage. "You're going to kill them," Kellen said flatly. "Of course I am," he replied. "It's called strategic cleanup, even though they're not attacking anyone, not yet." The comm crackled and died as she cut the line. Kellen moved. The apex was gone for now, drawn away by the heavier fire teams deeper in the gauntlet. She had minutes, maybe less, before it doubled back, and when it did, it would expect to find its nest untouched. She knelt beside the cubs. They flinched at her approach, their tiny claws skittering over the scorched ground. One hissed, a pitiful imitation of the roar she'd heard earlier. "It's okay," she whispered, as if they could understand. "I'm not your enemy." The smallest one, the one with the cracked ridge, stumbled forward, sniffing the air around her hand. Its scales felt warm under her glove, pulsing faintly with bioluminescent veins. A biotech marvel, a living weapon. A child. Her chest ached. She didn't know what she was doing. None of this was part of the plan. She was supposed to stay alive, maybe scrape into the final 20. Maybe, if the stars aligned, outlast a few stronger opponents and retire with a payout big enough to erase her debts. But now, here she was, cradling a predator's cub in the middle of the deadliest arena in the galaxy. Her father's voice echoed in her head. "The universe doesn't hand you plans. It hands you choices. The difference between cowards and legends is which ones they run from." A low vibration trembled through the ground. Leaves shivered. Birds, mechanical, surveillance drones disguised as them, burst from the canopy. The apex was coming back. She had seconds. Kellen scooped the cubs into the hollow of her chest armor, cradling them like she'd seen handlers do with medical drones. They fit there, barely, their tiny talons curling instinctively around the fabric. They chirped, nervous, but not afraid. "Hang on," she whispered, and bolted. Branches tore at her armor. Acid mist hissed against the plating of her boots as she vaulted over the green-glowing river. She sprinted through the wreckage of a downed carrier and ducked into the husk of its cargo bay, panting, pressing her back against cold steel. Then she heard it, not the roar. The footsteps. Slow, heavy, deliberate. The apex wasn't chasing anything. It was searching, and it was close enough that she could smell it. A mix of ozone, scorched minerals, and blood. Her visor sensors spiked from the bioelectric field alone. "Vey," someone shouted over the comms. "It's on the east quadrant. For God's sake, get out of there." The rest was cut off by a wet, metallic crunch. Kellen clenched her jaw. She stayed perfectly still. Even her breathing was measured, slow, shallow. She'd worked maintenance inside zero-atmo reactors before. She knew how to move when a single breath could kill you. The apex's massive silhouette passed just beyond the broken hull. It sniffed the air, tail slicing through the debris with a noise like tearing sheet metal. For a moment, Kellen thought it might turn away. Then it froze. The cub in her chest cavity let out a tiny, involuntary chirp. The apex's head snapped toward the sound. Shit. Kellen dove just as the hull wall exploded inward. A claw the size of a fusion blade carved through steel like tissue, missing her by inches. The force of the shockwave threw her across the bay, pain lancing up her spine as she hit a bulkhead. The apex roared, not in rage, but in recognition. It knew where its children were. She scrambled to her feet and ran. Metal shrieked and sparked behind her as the creature tore through the wreck, like a god dismantling a toy. She didn't look back. Looking back meant slowing down, and slowing down meant death. "Vey." Alex's voice again, this time panicked. "Where the hell are you?" "Busy," she shouted, vaulting a twisted support beam. "Tell your sponsors they're going to need a big arena." She burst out of the carrier's hull and into the acid-lit clearing. Gunfire erupted somewhere to her right, plasma bolts and ion rounds hammering into the apex's flank. It roared in irritation, not pain, and slammed a claw into the ground. The shockwave tossed armored soldiers like leaves in a storm. Kellen skidded behind a slab of starship plating and gasped for air. The cubs whimpered softly against her armor. "What do I do?" she whispered. "What do I do?" Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw movement, a streak of silver darting between the trees. Not the apex, a drone, but not a combat drone. This one was shaped like a bird, feather-thin, wings rippling like solar sails. It circled above her once, scanning, then projected a holographic glyph into the dirt, 3 alchemical symbols, old, obscure. But Kellen recognized them. She'd seen them scrawled into a data ship left in her locker before the trials. A message from someone who knew something. Fire, air, earth, hide them in the elements. It was insane. It was vague, and yet, she looked around. To her left, a vent shaft still hissed steam from the ground. Geothermal exhaust from the arena's artificial tectonic systems. To her right, the acid river bubbled, thick and green. Above, a canopy of dense vines hung low. It might work. It was all she had. Kellen ran again, ducking beneath the canopy and sprinting toward the steam vents. The apex followed, smashing aside wreckage, hurling slabs of metal the size of ground cars. Its roars shook the jungle to its roots. "Come on," she hissed to the cubs. Almost there. She reached the vents and pried open a narrow maintenance hatch. Inside was a network of heat pipes, dangerous, but shielded. Enough space to nestle the cubs inside. Safe from scanners, safe from the apex. "Stay quiet," she whispered, easing them in. The smallest one nuzzled her glove before disappearing into the dark. The apex crashed into the clearing moments later. It skidded to a halt, head whipping side to side. It could smell them, but it couldn't see them. Its roars grew frantic, then mournful. Kellen crouched low behind the exhaust housing, heart aching as the great beast searched for its young. "I'll come back," she whispered. "I promise." She meant it. But the trials weren't finished, and neither was Alec Volsarn. She barely had time to register the heat signature behind her before something slammed into the back of her head. Her vision exploded in white stars as she hit the ground, blood roaring in her ears. Alec loomed above her, rifle leveled, his grin a polished weapon. "You just made yourself the most valuable piece of bait in this arena," he said. "Congratulations, Vey. You're about to help me kill a god." And through the ringing in her skull, Kellen realized something with cold, creeping certainty. The real danger wasn't the apex. It was the humans hunting it, and they were far more ruthless than any beast. The first thing Kellen tasted when she regained consciousness was iron, metallic and bitter, pooling on her tongue, blood. The second was smoke, the kind that comes from scorched circuitry and burned ozone. The aftermath of a pulse grenade. Her vision flickered back slowly. A headache pounded behind her eyes, every heartbeat a hammer blow. When she finally focused, she realized she was bound to a column of rusted starship plating, wrists clamped in electromagnetic cuffs. Her weapons were gone. The cubs were gone. And standing less than 2 meters away, basking in the glow of a holographic, tactical display, was Alec Volsarn. "Rise and shine, Vey," he said without looking at her. His voice had lost the honeyed charm from before. It was colder now, stripped down to its calculating core. "You've caused me a great deal of inconvenience." Kellen tried to move, but the cuffs shocked her with a sharp pulse of current, freezing every muscle. "What did you do with them?" She croaked, throat raw. "The cubs?" Alec finally turned. His perfect smile returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Relax, they're alive. For now. What do you want with them?" She hissed. "What everyone wants," he said, stepping closer. "Control." The holotable beside him projected a rotating model of the apex, labeled Xenogen 01, along with genetic markers scrolling in a cascade of alien code. Kellen recognized none of it, but she didn't have to. The intent was obvious. "They're not just animals," Alec continued, pacing like a lecturer. "They're prototypes. The apex is a weaponized genome, adaptive, self-replicating, capable of surviving in any environment. Its offspring are the key to unlocking the next generation of military bioweapons." "Bioweapons?" Kellen spat. "They're living creatures," he chuckled. "So are soldiers." A chill ran through her. She had suspected, but hearing him confirm it made her stomach twist. "You're insane. The trials aren't supposed to be about this. The trials stopped being about glory decades ago," Alec said, leaning closer. "They're an auction. The Imperium, the syndicates, the privateer houses. They watch, they bet, they buy. The apex isn't just a final obstacle. It's a demonstration." He tilted his head, studying her. "And you, Kellen Vey, you did something none of us expected. You earned its trust. I didn't, don't lie. It followed you. It spared you. And it will come back for those cubs." His grin sharpened. "And when it does, I'll kill it." Kellen's stomach dropped. "You're going to use them as bait." Exactly. The plan was monstrous, but effective. Alec's team had already fortified the clearing, plasma turrets mounted in a ring, drone swarms humming overhead, seismic charges buried beneath the soil. In the center, a containment unit glowed faintly, and inside, Kellen could see them. The cubs, all three, huddled together, trembling. Her heart clenched. They looked so small now, so fragile. "Do you know why I offered you an alliance?" Alec asked, stepping back into the light. "Because I saw something in you. Not strength, not skill. Something rarer. Pity?" She muttered. "Instinct," he said, ignoring her jab. "You think like a survivor. That's why I'm going to give you a choice." He crouched down, face level with hers. "Help me lure the apex. Stand with me. Share in the kill. You'll walk away from this trial a hero, rich beyond imagining." Or, his smile vanished. "Refuse, and I'll shoot you where you sit and feed your corpse to its young." Kellen met his gaze. "You think you're the apex predator here," she said softly. "But you've never met a mother looking for her children." For the first time, Alec's smile faltered. Night fell over the gauntlet like a storm. Artificial clouds rolled across the dome, blotting out the false stars. The jungle, once alive with distant gunfire and mechanical shrieks, grew eerily silent. The apex was coming. Kellen could feel it, a low, seismic vibration thrumming through the ground, deeper than any footfall. The turrets activated, scanning the perimeter with beams of red light. Drones swirled in a tight defensive pattern. Soldiers, Alec's private unit, not contestants, knelt behind barricades, weapons primed. "Positions," Alec barked. Thermal sensors up, motion scanners active. Kellen strained against her cuffs. Sparks hissed. Nothing. Then, somewhere beyond the tree line, the night roared. It wasn't just sound. It was presence, a primal announcement to every living thing that the hierarchy had shifted, and that death was walking toward them. "Contact," shouted one of Alec's men. East quadrant. Hold fire, Alec ordered. Wait until it's in range. The canopy exploded. The apex crashed into the clearing like a thunderbolt wrapped in muscle and bone. Plasma turrets spun and fired, beams slicing through the air, scorching scale and flesh, but the beast didn't falter. It leapt, claws tearing through metal, snapping drones out of the sky with a single sweep. Now, Alec roared. Dozens of soldiers opened fire. Bolts of blue-white plasma lit the night. Explosions shook the ground. The apex roared in fury, slamming its tail into the soil. The shockwave rippled outward, flipping barricades and tossing soldiers like dolls. But it wasn't trying to kill them. It was trying to get to the cubs. Override the safety on the charge grid. Alec shouted over the din. We end this here. Kellen's pulse hammered. She had to move, had to stop this, but the cuffs held tight. Her options were shrinking by the second. Come on, she whispered, struggling. Come on. Then, something changed. A tiny, deliberate click echoed from the cuff's locking mechanism. Her head snapped up. A small, metal object, the size of a coin, rolled to her feet. A hacker's node, standard issue, blinking with a faint blue light. Someone had slipped it to her. Who? She muttered, scanning the shadows. At the edge of the clearing, a figure moved, hooded, faceless. Gone in an instant. Friend or foe, she didn't care. It was a chance. Kellen twisted her wrists, aligning the cuffs with the node. Sparks hissed, then popped. The electromagnetic field sputtered and died. The cuffs clattered to the ground. She was free. Kellen moved before her body remembered how tired it was. She sprinted to the containment field, bullets screaming past her as soldiers focused on the apex. A plasma bolt grazed her shoulder, spinning her sideways, but she didn't stop. Hang on, she shouted to the cubs, slamming her fist into the control panel. It sparked, denied access. She slammed it again, and again. Come on, you bastard. The field collapsed with a hiss. The cubs stumbled free, chirping frantically, eyes wide. Go, she urged. Find your mother. They hesitated only a moment before bounding toward the apex. The great beast saw them and roared, a sound not of rage, but of relief. It swept them behind its massive body, shielding them from the storm of plasma. What are you doing? Alec screamed, spinning toward her. Ending this, Kellen spat, snatching up a fallen rifle. Alec fired first. She dove, the shot searing past her cheek. She rolled, came up kneeling, and pulled the trigger. The bolt slammed into his shoulder plate, sending him sprawling. You're siding with it, he shouted, clutching the wound. I'm siding with the only thing here that isn't a monster, she said. The apex bellowed and surged forward, smashing through the last defensive line. Alec stumbled backward as its massive shadow loomed over him. He raised his weapon, but it was too late. One swipe of its claw sent him flying across the clearing, his armor sparking as he crashed into the wreckage of a gun emplacement. The battlefield fell silent. Smoke curled into the night. Broken drones crackled and sparked. And in the center of it all, the apex stood over its young, its breathing ragged, its body scorched and bleeding, but alive. Slowly, carefully, Kellen approached. Her rifle hung loose at her side. The apex watched her, chest heaving. Its eyes glowed faintly, locking onto hers. She felt no fear this time, only understanding. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she whispered. They turned you into a weapon. The beast tilted its massive head, as if it understood. Then, with surprising gentleness, it nudged one of the cubs toward her. She dropped to one knee, hand trembling as she touched its scales, warm, alive, trusting. A deep rumble vibrated through the air, not a roar this time, but something softer, almost thankful. The sirens blared before she could react. A monotone voice echoed through the arena, warning, unauthorized interference detected. Trial parameters compromised. Extraction team inbound. Kellen's blood ran cold. The trials were over, and the real predators, the ones behind the glass, were coming. The apex sensed it too. It let out a low growl, scanning the tree line. Its cubs huddled closer, chirping anxiously. Kellen stood and looked toward the horizon, where dropships were descending through the artificial clouds, their engines glowing red. They won't stop, she whispered to the creature. Not until they have you. The apex's gaze met hers again, and for the first time, Kellen felt like it was asking her a question. She tightened her grip on the rifle, heart pounding. She knew the choice before her now, one that would shape the rest of her life: run or fight. The night sky above the gauntlet burned crimson. Dropships pierced the artificial clouds like fangs, trailing vapor and flame as they descended. Their engines howled with the shriek of cutting air. Not the clumsy transport craft contestants arrived in, but sleek military-grade interceptors, black and unmarked, their wings emblazoned only with the sigil of the Imperium's Directorate of Xenobiotic Security. The trials were over. This wasn't sport anymore. It was containment. Kellen felt the vibration of their approach in her chest before she even saw them. Dust rose from the jungle floor. Leaves quivered. The cubs pressed themselves tighter against their mother's legs, and the apex, wounded, exhausted, but still titanic, lifted its head toward the sky and roared. It wasn't a challenge. It was a warning. "They're coming for all of you," Kellen whispered. The apex's eyes, molten gold rimmed with ember red, locked with hers. In them, she saw more than animal instinct. She saw something ancient, deliberate, aware. It understood what was happening. It understood the stakes, and still, it did not flee. The first dropship touched down with a bone-shaking thoom, its stabilizers kicking up a hurricane of grit. Doors hissed open. Dozens of soldiers poured out, clad in graphite black combat exoskeletons, rifles bristling with biodisruptor coils. Their visors glowed blue-white, cold, surgical, impersonal. Xenogen 01 detected. A voice barked over a loudspeaker. "Containment Protocol Alpha. All non-combatants are to stand down immediately." Kellen gritted her teeth. Non-combatant, that's what they called contestants now. As if they were just background noise in someone else's operation. Alec was still alive, though barely. She could see him slumped against the wreckage, armor cracked, one arm hanging limp. Two med drones floated down beside him, scanning his vitals. He gave her a hate-filled look, his lips split and bleeding. "You should have taken the deal." He spat over the comm line. "Now we're all going to die, maybe," Kellen said, her eyes on the apex. "But I won't die on my knees." The soldiers advanced in perfect formation, weapons humming with lethal charge. The apex reared back, placing itself between the cubs and the advancing line. Plasma bursts erupted, searing into the ground at its feet. The creature staggered but did not retreat. It couldn't. Kellen ducked behind a collapsed turret as the first wave opened fire. Explosions rocked the clearing. The apex roared and charged, its massive tail swatting soldiers aside like dolls. Claws tore into metal and armor. Biodisruptor rounds sizzled against its hide, leaving burns and open wounds that smoked in the night air. And still, it fought for them. Kellen's heart pounded. She knew she couldn't just watch. She had started this. She had freed the cubs, turned a trial into a war. And now, standing by while the creature died defending them was unthinkable. "Think, Kellen," she muttered to herself. "Think." Her eyes fell on the ruined containment unit, or more precisely, its still-functioning core capacitor, glowing faintly amid the wreckage. A plan, half-formed, reckless, probably suicidal, took shape in her mind. She bolted. Bullets hissed past as she sprinted across the clearing. A soldier shouted, "Hostile contestant, take her down." Plasma scorched the dirt at her heels. One shot clipped her thigh, sending a jolt of pain through her leg, but she didn't stop. She dove behind the shattered core and yanked open the panel, fingers flying over the interface. Capacitor charge, 37%. Containment pulse, manual trigger available. Warning. Pulse will disable all bioelectric organisms within 50 meters. It would fry every living thing in the blast radius. Apex, soldiers, her. But it would also buy time. She glanced toward the apex. It was bleeding heavily now, limping, yet still moving, still standing guard over its young. The cubs huddled beneath its chest, crying softly. "You protected them," she whispered. "Let me return the favor." "They." Alec's voice roared in her ear. "What the hell are you doing?" "Something you'd never understand," she muttered. She slammed the override and primed the capacitor. The hum was immediate and terrifying, a deep, resonant thrum that made the ground itself vibrate. Electricity arced across the wreckage, licking at the metal like lightning, searching for a target. Soldiers shouted warnings, scrambling to retreat. The apex turned its head toward her, as if sensing the shift. "Hey," Kellen called out, raising a trembling hand toward the beast. "Take care of them." And then she hit pulse. The world went white. A dome of blue energy exploded outward from the capacitor, swallowing everything in its path. Kellen felt it slam into her body like a tidal wave, every nerve screaming as bioelectric feedback surged through her. The apex roared, a sound of pain and defiance, before collapsing to one knee. Soldiers dropped like marionettes with their strings cut. Weapons fizzled. Drones spiraled from the sky. Dead silence followed. Heavy, absolute. Kellen lay flat on her back, gasping, her muscles twitching uncontrollably. She couldn't move, could barely think, but when her vision cleared, she saw the most important thing. The apex was still alive, weakened, wounded, but alive. Slowly, painfully, it rose. The cubs crawled beneath it, chirping softly. The creature turned its gaze toward her, and for a moment, just a moment, Kellen thought she saw something more than gratitude in those eyes. It was acknowledgement. The sound of rotor blades cut through the quiet. A second wave of dropships was descending, larger, heavier, and far more numerous. Reinforcements, if they reached the ground. There would be no surviving this. Kellen forced herself upright, every muscle protesting. "We have to go," she whispered. Now, the apex seemed to understand. It lowered its head, gesturing toward its back. She stared, unsure if she was imagining it. "You want me to?" The creature snorted impatiently. Kellen staggered forward, grabbing onto a ridge of armored scale and hauling herself up. The surface was warm beneath her hands, slick with blood and sweat. The cubs scrambled up after her, curling against her legs. For the first time in her life, she felt small, but not powerless. The apex roared once more and broke into a run. The jungle blurred around them as they moved. Trees snapped underfoot. The ground quaked with every stride. Behind them, the sky filled with searchlights and missile trails, but the apex was faster. Impossibly fast. It ducked under collapsing bridges, leapt over molten rivers, tore through barriers that had been designed to stop tanks. Kellen held on tight, the cubs clinging to her armor. Wind roared past her ears. Her heart pounded with terror and exhilaration. For the first time, she wasn't running from the trials. She was running beyond them. "Where are you taking us?" she shouted over the wind. The apex didn't answer, of course. But when the jungle opened into a vast, hidden canyon, a place not on any arena map, she realized the truth. It was taking them home. The canyon stretched for miles, filled with bioluminescent flora and crystalline pools. Strange creatures, smaller, docile variants of the apex, peeked out from the shadows, watching silently as their kind returned. It was a sanctuary, a refuge, a nest that had existed long before the trials. The apex slowed to a halt at the canyon's heart and lowered itself. Kellen slid off, legs trembling as she touched the ground. "You were never their monster," she whispered. "They built the arena around your home." The beast rumbled softly, a sound that was neither growl nor purr. It lowered its head until it was level with hers. And in that moment, there was no predator and prey, no human and monster. There were only two survivors who had chosen something different. The cubs bounded past her, joining a chorus of others. The apex watched them for a long moment before turning back to Kellen. Then, in a gesture that stunned her, it nudged her forward, toward the canyon's exit. "You want me to go," she said softly. Another rumble, affirmation. Kellen swallowed hard. "I'll come back," she promised. "I swear it. I'll make them stop." The apex blinked slowly, as if accepting her oath. Then it turned away, disappearing into the shadows of the canyon with its young in tow. Kellen stood there alone, the night breeze cool against her blood-streaked skin. Above, the sound of dropships grew distant. The arena, the trials, the hunters, all of it felt like a different universe now. Because in that moment, she understood something no champion ever had. The trials weren't about killing the strongest. They were about understanding them. Days later, the galaxy would argue over what had happened. Some said Kellen was a traitor. Others called her a savior. The directorate issued warrants. The syndicates placed bounties. The arena committee scrubbed her name from the rankings. but they couldn't erase the footage of the apex walking beside a human, of its cubs clinging to her armor, of the arena's most feared creature choosing mercy over vengeance. And when asked why she did it, Cullen only ever said one thing: because sometimes the difference between monster and mother is just the story we choose to tell. And so it was that Kellen Vey, the girl who ranked 99th and was never supposed to win, became something the galaxy had never seen before, the first human ever welcomed into the Apex's nest. And when the Apex roared again, far beyond the walls of the arena, she walked out with its cubs,